Hey, what's up, Paul?
Hi, Manny.
Dr. Manny Sinai, Paul Ramsey. We're back for more hypnosis stuff. Tonight's topic is who can be hypnotized. So let's get right into it, Paul. So let me ask you. Let me start right out. Uh, Hypnotizability and suggestibility.
Not the same thing. Hence the use of two different words. Well, a lot of hypnotists.
Sorry.
See, a lot of people, they talk generally about the overall idea of how everyday ordinary people will just talk about whether or not they're hypnotizable. But hypnotizability is in itself a form of suggestibility. It's primary suggestibility.
Okay.
So your ability to accept suggestions which would formally lead you into a heterohypnosis experience, primary suggestibility. Now, once you get into that hypnotic state and you're in that experience, the suggestions that are given to you beyond that point to get you to do stuff, those would be secondary suggestions.
Okay.
And that's a whole other kind of suggestibility. So first, I think it's about assessing your primary suggestibility, your hypnotizability, and getting you to get comfortable with understanding that. And then we can explore what levels of suggestibility you have once you're in trance. What can we get done with you? Does that make sense?
Sort of. Is hypnotizability, suggestibility into entering the whole experience?
Yeah, so primary suggestibility would be your hypnotizability.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, so going back to primary suggestibility, if I'm keeping track of that, right? What determines primary suggestibility?
How well you respond to suggestions which are created specifically, explicitly, with the intention of leading you into a hypnotic state. So, this kind of goes back to what we talked about in the last video, the idea that when we talked about awareness and mindfulness and how suggestion is coming at you all the time as you make meaning, you've got all these suggestions, all of these intentions that are coming at you, from body language to direct verbal suggestion. Most of them aren't intended to lead you into a trance state. So you have a level of suggestibility going on all the time. How well do you pick up the suggestions that are coming to you? Most of them aren't about getting you into hypnosis. They might be about getting you to pass the salt, or want to go on a date with someone or something like that, buy something. Primary suggestions are created with the explicit intent of leading you into a hypnotic state. So, we're talking about me creating a verbal pattern of language intended to slow down your breathing, bring your attention inward to yourself, and help you follow a process of relaxation that sort of lulls you into hypnosis. Or direct suggestions asking you to fixate on my stereotypical pocket watch and use a fixation technique to get you into hypnosis. That's the kind of stuff that, and so we can do those as an exercise. We can do light, simple exercises that assess how well you respond to those kinds of suggestions. Okay, I'll stop there.
Now, indirect commands.
Indirects?
Indirect suggestions.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to revisit that. We touched on that slightly yesterday, but I want to talk about that out of curiosity in the context of something I've, and this is for the marketing folks hanging out with us, call to actions that involve embedded versus direct commands, I guess, would be.
Okay, so then you're looking at like secondary suggestions, right? So now you're creating suggestions that you want to lead people to action, but you don't want to formally hypnotize them. So that might be like talking about a behavioral aspect, like how to be good in a relationship, and you might be talking to someone and say, or you might talk to your son, and you're talking about behavior, and you might look at him and say, you're not supposed to ask to do it, just do it. And it's hard because you have to build context around it. But let's look at Just Do It, the Nike slogan. That's sort of an embedded command, right? Of what they really want you to do is feel moved to action. And so they literally built that as their slogan. And that was what they pounded us with for years and years. They don't pound us with it like they used to. They just kind of let it hover because it's well established. But just do it. Listen. Just to say some conversationally, you ever notice not everyone does this, but some people will start conversational junctures with listen.
Yeah.
You're right, and you take for granted that that's a command. It seems like just a quirk of how people that's how they talk, but they're telling you to listen, and people adopt little things like that. Those are suggestions. So.
Now, one that I've seen in the marketing literature, and hopefully this doesn't take us too far down a rabbit hole, is the whole concept of identity-based indirect suggestion, indirect command. Like if I know someone's aspiring to be a good athlete, one way I could influence them into a certain set of behaviors is to say, well, Popeye eats his spinach. Yeah, you introduce an aspirational identity that they strive to, and you put the commands within that.
Right.
We do that with patients sometimes with patient compliance, where we'll frame it where the illusion is, well, not necessarily illusion, the social framing is that the people of higher class are taking their meds regularly, and that's why they're functioning higher, and that's why. We used to, in inpatient unit, we kind of framed it like the patients that were outpatient, which in psychiatric units society is sort of higher functioning, erudite almost. We're like, yeah, they take their meds all the time. And outpatient, we anchored that identity.
Yeah.
And lots of repetition.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that maybe we should hold off. We're going to have that later episode where we talk about conversational Ericksonian style hypnosis.
Okay.
And that's where you really start getting into that kind of stuff where you look at just what seem like very normal average language constructions that are actually very tactical, that are very purposefully constructed and tactically chosen to create certain outcomes with people in a healthy way and help them create change. Yeah, but for today, starting with basics about suggestibility, I would say let's not go there. Let's stick with, can you begin, if you're considering experiencing hypnosis, can you begin with the simple premise that we all take suggestions on a daily basis? Sometimes we even give them to ourselves in our self-talk. And can you begin to approach the idea of experiencing hypnosis by accepting that if you're going to do heterohypnosis with a hypnotist, that you're going to need to take some direction. You're going to need to take some suggestion. And what does it take for you to get comfortable with that? That's what we really want to explore. Because if the goal is to help you, whether it's just to de-stress, sleep better, get rid of a bad habit like nail biting, quit smoking, whatever, there has to be a level of compliance that you achieve in order to let that hypnotist help you. Otherwise, the suggestions are going to just, not work.
Now, out of curiosity, right about now, I'm tempted to ask for a suggestibility test. You have one in your pocket?
Yeah, no, we can do a simple. So a lot of times when people meet me, especially, as I said before, I do a lot of stage hypnotism, and I really like to work my audience. I like to work my crowd and start developing rapport well before the show starts. So if it's an open theater, I'll go out and walk the aisles and chat with people. If it's sometimes even if they've got the doors closed and there's a line, if there's a queue at the door, I'll go out and walk the queue and just start chatting with people. And what'll happen is there's always people who are curious. People are really fascinated, and so they'll say, can you tell me whether I'd be able to be hypnotized right now? And I'll say, sure, and I'll do a quick suggestibility test with them right on the spot. So one that's really simple is if you take your hands, and you guys watching at home can do this. This isn't hypnosis. It's just a assessment. It's an exercise. It's kind of fun. If you take your hands and you kind of do the Charlie's Angels gun, right, and you put your fingertips right at eye level, maybe 8 to 10 inches in front of your face, and then you pull your fingertips apart a good strong inch. That's your setup. And then what you want to do is stare not so much at the fingertips as the space between the fingers. You want to visually fixate on that space. And then all I want you to do is just think about the idea of having magnets in the tips of your fingers. And imagine that feeling of magnets pulling toward each other. Now you've held magnets on, you took them off the fridge at home and played with them, or you held them in a science class. And just imagine that you've got magnets right in the tips of the fingers. You know that feeling, and as you focus more and more on that feeling of magnetism, you should feel those fingers want to draw down toward each other. Very effortlessly, really. They just sort of relax and come toward each other. And of course, the closer they get, the more that magnetic field gets strong, right? Because being closer allows it to get concentrated. And so it gets easier and easier to just let them draw down, coming together, until finally they come together and touch. And when they touch, the exercise is over. So that's a really simple, you can do that exercise as we just did in like 30 seconds.
I'm a cheap date, dude.
Huh?
I'm a cheap date, man.
It's simple, it's easy, right? And the reality is, this is a nice one to do with first-time hypnotic subjects because the way your hands are built, right? If I hold my hands separate, how do my fingers want to be, right? They want to go this way. It takes effort to pull them apart. And so naturally, if you relax at all, they should want to just drift down and go toward each other. So when you do that exercise with someone, if they're like not going anywhere, they're fighting it. They're like really fighting it. And so as you run that pattern, you can run that pattern about relaxing and getting more loose and relaxed and magnetized, and you kind of learn as you do it to develop those words and those feelings and get all that going. So, you know, most folks should be able to do that. And if they can't, they're not showing you the suggestibility that you'd like to see if you're going to proceed further. And so then you have to decide, okay, what do I do about that? You know? So that's a good starting point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So it's in large part a test of maybe subconscious willingness.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we talked about in the previous video of expectation. So if you're working with someone who really strongly has a favorable expectation of being hypnotized, this usually is no problem. It just happens very, very effortlessly. If you've got someone, you'll find that there are people who their expectation is really to prove that they are so strong-willed that they cannot be hypnotized. Yeah. And so they won't vocalize that, but it's what's going on internally. Yeah. And so this is where it never gets past this.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a determination to prove that they are too strong. They are just too strong-willed. And you know, and I don't worry about fighting with people about that. I'm like, all right, I hope that made you happy, and I move on to people who want to
fulfillment. You know. Now, one question I see Kevin Burns has asked, as well as I think Zara has asked, is about heterosuggestion and heterohypnosis.
Yeah, so we use, thank you. I should have explained that when I started using the term before. So we use hetero and auto. Hetero being between two people, and auto being with the self. So we have heterohypnosis and we have autohypnosis, self-hypnosis. Heterohypnosis being between a hypnotic operator and a volunteer, a client, a subject. Same thing with suggestions, Kevin. You can give yourself suggestions, and you can give yourself suggestions in the waking state. You have the freedom to choose, do you want to deepen your focus and increase receptivity by doing auto-hypnosis first, then giving auto-suggestions in that state, self-suggestions? Or do you want to say, I don't really think I need to go that far into the process. I would like to just practice auto-suggestion in the waking state throughout my day. Goes back to what I said before, Manny, that stuff's coming all the time, right? Radio ads, TV ads, print images, conversations with other people, especially teachers, coaches, parents, people that we hold in high esteem. And then probably the most overlooked thing is self-talk. Yep. How do we talk internally, not even out loud? How do we talk internally to ourselves and about ourselves? And how do we even sometimes talk externally in private, in the car, in a room all by ourselves, about ourselves, and what suggestions are we giving ourselves about what we're capable of and what we're not capable of?
Absolutely. One discussion that I have with people often, and this is along those lines, is that you have, in your brain, there are various pieces, concepts that sometimes, if we don't take the time to explore that part in our emotional map, come together. One example is obsessive compulsive disorder, where you have a thought-action fusion, where the person has the thought and the action is so close to it conceptually that they feel the pull and they almost have to go do an undoing.
Mm-hmm.
Another example some people are probably more familiar with is poor differentiation of their negative emotions, where we walk them through, and we tend to use trance like specific for walking someone through a thought process, a previous traumatic experience, but we want them to take some time to differentiate between something that should fully trigger a PTSD episode or an anxiety episode, and realizing that they're no longer there. It's almost like create a separate memory. Create two memories. That was an event in the past. Let's label it past. And you are here now, and although we're re-experiencing that feeling, let's label that a more adaptive, less trigger-based. And I think people who are willing to trust you enough to walk through that process, that's the suggestibility that usually we use in clinical.
That makes sense. That makes sense. It's very sensible. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, let's see. Do we have any other questions? Because we, when we planned these, we wanted the other ones, other than the first one, to be kind of shorter. So.
Yeah, I mean, we can take some. I'm happy to stretch this a little more if people have questions. Is there anything else that? No, that was pretty much what we had said we wanted to cover. So.
So we're good. What's tomorrow's topic?
It's a good question. What is tomorrow's topic? Tomorrow we're going to talk about the hypnotic experience, awesome. Which again, not something that a lot of people would think to have as a topic, but I get so many questions from people about just the basics of what is it like to be hypnotized, and then what I find is that people work hard to evaluate their own hypnotic experience according to whatever they think the hypnotic experience is supposed to be like. So I want to spend some time in our next session really talking about the possibilities and letting people have a little more freedom to define their hypnotic experience for themselves and not so rigidly expect it to be a certain way. I think that happens too much and it ruins it for people. And that's not cool.
Yeah. Mindfulness is similar.
Right?
You're like, there's no sparkles, no magic. This is, you just
I get that sometimes you want sparkles, right? It's okay to want sparkles.
Yeah.
But,
you just got to find what's inside you, and there's no existing outside definition. But we can dig into that tomorrow. So I think we're good till tomorrow. I will see you tomorrow. Huh?
All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us.
I'm Manny Cyanide.
I'm Paul Ramsey. Have a good one.